Hello, and welcome back to another session of Boomeadow Builds The State of Anarchy, which will be the name of this D&D campaign when I finally get it started up and running. But first we have to finish building the world map. How is everybody today? I hope you're doing well. Hi, Tyrant Dungeon! I hope you're enjoying the music. I really love game shops for my starting music. So, decided to change it up for a little bit of pokey tape. So, they've got some good stuff that uses game stuff. So yeah, game shops is great. I also like Lofi Girl, which I swap to once this is all finished up. So, however, we are jumping back into Feyawyr, which is the alternate version of the Feywild in my world because of the events of the campaign that was set in the third era of the world, which led to an event called the Merge, which was the merging of the Hell Planes, the Material Plane, and the Feywild as they drew closer and closer together in the event that was the rising of the Titan King due to the Necronomicon and player involvement, which led to the three planes of existence that were echoes of each other to basically be pulled together and stacked on top of each other within the same kind of parallel mirror planescape. So that is what we are building. The start of the campaign will actually take place in the Feywild portion because the material plane is currently being run by the tyrannical witch queens. So they are some of the magic, the only magic users, their group of, I suppose they end up being kind of like the nobility. They're the only ones that can really command magic with any kind of true ability due to where they get their magic from, which it was changed in the first era because it was through eldritch blood sacrifice, and through the events of that it led to magic for a time being from draconic causes, and then in the fourth era, at the end of the second era and the start of the third era, they started using sap from the world tree that they had mined, basically. So, weave ore, as they call it. So, this is kind of what we're working on. You can see that this will have the world tree in the center of it. But we are currently working on the top right hand side today. We finished in the last stream, we actually managed to finish up the autumn spring part of the world, and now we're moving on to the spring winter side. So if we jump across, you can see what we've already kind of like built on. We've gone through and we've put in all of the human towns as at the moment. So we were going to go through today and put in some Fey towns. We have to change some names of some mountain ranges, some hill ranges, come up with some new ones. These are the current territories of the area. And yes, we've got to put in some Fey towns. Now I have been doing some compiling of names and things like this, which I will draw from, but I am open to viewer input within reason. Anyone who has been here will know that I have mixed results on getting player feedback on names. It can either end really badly or really well. However, if there's a good story behind a name, I also like that. So we will jump in figuring out where we are going to put some of these towns. Now, the first thing we will actually need is the token, which, have to think about this, is this one. But this is the wrong colour, so we will go through and go to the filters. I use Incarnate, for anyone who is wondering, to build my world maps. When it comes to making the city maps, which we will move on to, some of them are going to be, I am going to go through and I am in the process of making some custom assets, because Incarnate, while great for fantasy settings, doesn't yet have anything for top-down futuristic kind of towns yet. There we go. Now if I've got this correct, this token, I made notes this time so I didn't have to go back and check. This token will actually be that, but at the moment I just want to make sure it's the right colour, the transparency. Good. The question is, where should we put some towns? Fae towns can be Fae villages, anything like that. Towns, villages, outposts, and the like. Okay, what are we looking at here? What are we working with? Okay. Chicken fingies. I am not naming a town chicken fingies, but we do have the Finger Lakes for you. So that should be fun for you there. Tyrant Dungeon. Just consulting my world maps here. Just seeing where I put some towns and whatnot. So, not only that, I'm also consulting with where I put forests and whatnot, because that's important. Okay. So we have a winter court in, but I think we would... I'm sure we could manage an area of it. It is the Feyawyr, so there is for sure some strange customs somewhere. The whether that was brought in by the humans or the Fae, I am not 100% sure. What do you think? Those crazy humans. All right. That could potentially make sense. I mean, that could very much be rooted in some opinions about food and whatnot. You think that that would be a spring or a winter custom, though? I could see it being a winter custom kind of thing a little bit in it is their way of sharing food and things like this. Yeah, there were definitely plenty of customs throughout history, at least even in human history, where there would be the idea of sharing food and things like this as dowries and whatnot, so I can definitely see it coming to pass. The Spring Fae definitely will have had, obviously, warmer climates to deal with and things like this, as it is indeed the turning of spring to summer. Now, this area down here, at least canonically, does turn into a desert. I might have to change that to a jungle, though, because in the material plane, at least, of this world, that is part of a desert. Because, at least within reason, it is on the equator. However, I don't think the Feywild runs by that rule, because not the standardized equator opinion anyway, mainly because, obviously, they have the spring, summer, winter and autumn courts, which are directed by the cardinal directions, at least within pagan mythos. The central area is owned by no one, none of the exact courts. It is watched over by the Eladrin courts, who are only beholden to the tree itself, the world tree itself. And the name for them, the Heart Guard, as they are known, is taken from the Norse mythos, representing the 4 deers at the base of Yggdrasil that eat away at its lower branches. Underneath the world tree is the prison containing a very, very ancient dragon. Depending on which kind of people you talk to about it. Some people know that it is, again, going with Norse mythos, it is Nidhaugur, the serpent that is chained under the world tree and gnaws at its roots. Other people believe that it is the Task, the draconic god of greed, where he was imprisoned after the destruction of the quarry world, the quarry spirit world, because within my particular setting, the quarry spirits that join up to make the Kalashtar they're actually an alien race, and their planet is called Dalkor. So, as you can see, I kind of intersperse D&D mythos, real world mythos, to try and create this really diverse world lore, basically. That there are many beginning places for the world. There are many stories of the world. And obviously each different race and culture and species will actually have different stories about how the world came into being, how certain things were created. I have had 5 years, a little more than 5 years actually now, to create this world, and I actually started creating this world in its second era and telling the story of its second era. So I started creating that in the second era and focused around the realm witches who were there to basically save the draconic gods who had all but assured their own destruction. So now this text. Right. I don't know why I'm doing this. I could just click one of these and it will actually auto do that for me, which is nice. Now we're starting out with some winter towns. One thing I actually wanted to do first while I was thinking about it, the Arcanid Ranges here, at least in the material plane, they're known as the Arcanid Ranges, and it is where the Drow, the Duragar, it is part of what was once known as the Wildlands, because the world was divided up into the Wildlands, the LUS, or the Loriadoran Unitary State, and the Starfall Islands. The Starfall Islands was what remained of the draconic-made world after the fall of the meteor that contained the Dark Quarry. The Light Quarry, because various people, basically, which I don't have this in the wider world map, but if I can show you, if I change over to the wider world map, you can see on here that in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a series of islands there, and that was all that was left. That dark chasm there is all that was left of the world of Azuria after the meteor fell. And then the realm witches, who had become the ascended gods and who are the ascended gods of the third era, they actually created the rest of the world to give all of the refugees of that place somewhere to go. They had worked with that. So yes, this Arcanid Ranges is, as you can see, there is Trollheim, the very big mountain there in the middle, which I don't know, should we change that? It's a slightly different place here, obviously, because this is winter turning into spring. So this lake here was very much a drow-named lake. But at the moment, the Arcanid Ranges are actually going to be changed within the Feywild to the Dathyornail Ranges. Dathyornail. Dathyornail. Which basically, I don't think I want to put the in the front. It basically means roughly the last path of winter. So, the last path of winter ranges as it descends into spring, which I thought was nice. I believe that is in Elven. I do try to use Elven. And we obviously have the Hibara up here, which is the giant glacial mountain. And the Quartek in Ilofri. I kind of like that. I think I want to keep that. It's nice. I do try to keep some similarities between the Hoodoo Hills. I will change because that is obviously a very human name for it. But I will be keeping Pentacle Bay, the Witch Dark Reef, just because I actually really like them, and it was a part of the world that we never actually explored in the Saturday campaign, in the third era campaign. So all of this is actually undiscovered territory, basically. So now that I have done that, let's have a look at our names, our list of winter names. Okay. Make sure I have a pen here to cross off the names that I've got. If anyone has some thoughts, interesting names, I am open to suggestions. So, Sel Nuru means high death. Simpra is North Tree. Very original. You know what? I will take it, because there are like gnome villages and things like this. As you'll see, there are... Okay, because you came up with Twiddly. Tyrant Dungeon, where should we put Twiddly? Take your pick. I do like to give the gnome villages and things like this, they do tend to have some of those kind of like Mudlick, for example, or Funk Thwack. What else? What other ones have I done? I think one of them was like Puddle Pop and things like this. So the gnome names I do tend to go a little bit more fun. So I am okay having Twiddly. But you can pick. Do you want it in spring or winter? This is what you have done. Enjoy what you have wrought. Okay, spring. You know what? I might put it somewhere over here. We will put Twiddly over here by one of these vines, one of these roots. Wait, do you want it near one of the roots or do you want it near one of the finger lakes? For a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke. Because we could legitimately put Twiddly over here by the lake known as the Puddle. Yeah, the fingers. We'll put it over by the puddle. I might put it down here by the northern end, the southern end of the puddle though. So it's a little bit more spring based. Okay. This is Twiddly. In honor of you, Tyrant Dungeon. There you go. You have a town on the map. Well done. Okay. So, some of these I do need to bring up little accents because my names do have the letter accents over it. So, might go this one right up here, maybe. Because this would be a very cold place. I actually might move that token down, marker just down, just a touch. But this is going to be Ferton. 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 I'll need to figure out how to do that if I'm going to pronounce these, because I cannot expect my players to pronounce them if I don't know how to pronounce it either. Okay, so it's Ferten. It is Ferten. Cool. Those 2 dots. It's an open E. It's a diaresis. So that's what the 2 dots are called. And it makes when it's over the E, it makes an E sound like in bet, if you didn't know. So Ferten. Which in this particular town case means death of winter, which I could move it further to the south. And death of winter, do you feel that that speaks more of something dying in winter, or do we think it's actually like the death of winter as in it's turning into spring? Which do you think? Because I can move it down. What are we thinking? Asking you all these questions, Tyrant Dungeon. Bear with me one sec. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I just spilled coffee all over my notes. Not the best thing for you to do. So hello, welcome back to everybody who is just joining us. We are working on the spring, winter. So, yeah. And you would think I would know better to use gel pen, because I needed to basically save all of my notes. It was a good time. Okay, so you know what? We might move Ferten down into the spring. Death of winter, I feel probably speaks more to a spring town. But we'll make it on a border here somewhere. And we'll just go, because all the text should be, I think, on 5. That's better. What are these little things called? Markers. You know what? I'll also put all the markers up on the 5th layer too. Because that way they'll be seen. Always good. Okay, so ferten. Death of Winter. Okay. And we'll come back up here. You can be Neve. Because it'll be the last time I'll get to use the winter name, so may as well make the most of it. Coldriff. I do tend to go with my naming conventions. Norwegian and things like that tend to be kind of the way that I name things in Dwarvish. Elven does tend to be the very French kind of aspect, which I think is historically kind of the way that it was done, especially with Tolkien and things like that. Funnily enough, a lot of the names that I get for like Nomish villages and things like this do tend to actually come from New Zealand. They got a great way of naming things over in New Zealand. What is that emote? What actually is that emote? Tyrant Dungeon? Looks like a purple cat wearing a crown or antlers. All the emotes. The moving ones are cute. Daeflin. Daeflin means white sleet. When you actually translate the names, they're not, I don't know. Monster from Monster Hunter. I don't know if I'd say that the names are particularly creative. Hello, welcome. We're just in the process of naming some Fae towns. Various Faes, Winter Fae, Shadow Fae, a lot of the spring kind of Fae. So yeah, we've done all of the human towns, and we're just working through naming all of these. So north is winter, and east is spring. So we're just kind of naming some stuff. At the moment we're working through winter names, but I am open to suggestions. Tyrant Dungeon has named a little gnomish town here on the Finger Lakes. This is called the Puddle, but the town is Twiddly. Because yes, my gnome villages can have some interesting names. So, Dayflin means white sleet. So, make of that what you wish. As we move further and further into spring, we'll start to get a few more spring names and things like this. So, Venoro means ice flower. Hello, Drop Bear. How are you doing today? You're just sitting in there ghosting, lurking. Join Tyrant Dungeon in the lurking prison. I love having you here, Tyrant Dungeon. It's nice having someone to talk to. And you have just the right amount of crazy brain for me. If any of you want to see more of Tyrant Dungeon's crazy brain, by the way, watch him in Only Credits. He is guest starring over on Evil One's channel on Sunday nights, playing Roger, the French battle droid. Or just check out Tyrant Dungeon's channel. You can find that kind of linked down in my About section. So they do art streams and things like this, game streams. They're a fabulous artist. If, you know, I think I'm a little biased, but I love Tyrant Dungeon's work. Well, please don't do that. We don't want emote only. How do I turn that off now? That's the question, Tyrant Dungeon. No one can tell me. Thank you for disabling that. I'm a degenerate. I live on Twitch. That's completely understandable. Thank you. Yes, this is what happens when you let the moderators mess around with things. Hello, welcome. We're trying to name some towns. Trying to name some towns here. Come down here. Oh, no, you are going to be Yellen. Welcome, welcome. Come in, help me name some towns. We're naming Fae towns, so. Before we populate with an absolute metric butt ton of trees. I'm excited to get this game up and running, actually. Get some adventurers in it. Thinking of starting it relatively low key, just your regular kind of dungeony stuff, which would be nice. What about you, Drop Bear? Do you have any potential names that you'd like to see on this map? Not that I think you'd actually ever play in this. Drop Bear is not really a tabletop gamer, which is why it's nice to see them playing a Wookiee in our Star Wars game. Verame means the whisper of winter peace. Verame. De Vista, meaning white change. I think I'm gonna have too many names, actually. We'll see. The I with the tonic accent. Aratlan. Means silver mysteries. There's a name that I actually want more here, so we'll move Lakash over here. Yeah, I'm excited to get into the world. It's fun getting to write the new world lore about how these Fae kingdoms kind of establish themselves. We have had, throughout the eras, we've now had several different Fae queens as well. I've cycled through actually a couple, which I'm in the process of creating a world anvil for. Which we did go through a... If I have a look at the articles in my world anvil, I can give you a little bit more information on that. So, the Feywild in this place, in the 4th era, it will become known as Feyawyr, but it once upon a time was called Alfheimer, or Elfheim. I do have a couple of lords and ladies of the Feywild. So the Queens of the Light Fae over the eras were called Queen Bloodwed, Titania, as everyone knows, and the current queen is Skogskre, Queen of the Forested Court, over the Light Fae, and in the winter in Svartalheimer, so Dark Fae home, we had Maeve, we had Queen Mab, and in the 4th era we have Sora, Queen of Cold Waters. So, as you can see, I take inspiration from Celtic mythos, Norse mythos. I'm starting to look into some of the Arabic mythos and things like that because I do really enjoy some of the creation of the genie courts and things like this. So you'll see that there is a lot of elemental kind of ties in. So we've got obviously the 4 genie courts for earth, air, fire and water with their respective names. Only noble jinn, so the royalty of the genies, can grant wishes, but predominantly the Ifrit, noble Ifrit, are the only ones that can actually grant wishes. So the fire genies. They did go through a whole war, division of power. The noble fire djinn bloodline was almost knocked out. So yeah. It did, however, I don't know if it's recovered yet, though. I haven't actually explored into it that far. Aritlan. You are not Aritlan. We don't want 2 places of the same name. We will change you, because there was one I wanted, which is Simuhar. Simuhar means North Wisdom. I wonder why it's named that. One of the reasons I started doing this stream as well was it was a way for me to actually talk to people about my world lore and, you know, give a platform where I could actually help other people who turn around and go, you know, there's so much lore to create, memorize. I didn't start. I started with the atypical DM advice of, you know, start with one village, which, you know, the whole keep it simple principle is great. But getting the advice of you don't need to map everything. Yeah. See, that's handy. I would... There are places where my lore is patchy because I just haven't created it. But I saw a really wonderful video the other day by Ginny D about telling a new DM, oh, you don't have to plan everything, is somewhat bad advice. And I kind of agree with her on this. One thing the way that I actually kind of started creating my world is from the point of the DM's handbook. And there was actually a really nice world building section at the front that just asked really simple questions like, how is magic in your world? Like, is it a magical world? Is it not a magical world? You know, and going through and asking those questions, like, you have to know the basic functions of how your world works. Like, do you want magic? Do you not want magic? Do you want it to be heavy military? Do you want it to be pretty free-flowing? From there, I kind of started to look into, like, well, what kind of government do you want? And I Googled different types of government. And this is how, obviously, the Loriadoran unitary state came into existence, because I didn't realise what a unitary state was. I really enjoy building the world lore. Does that mean that your players will always delve deeply into it? No. Anyone who has kind of DM'd for any period of time probably realises very quickly that it's not that players don't care, it's just if they don't necessarily have to interact with it for their story, it may not make sense for them to know. Or there's a lot of world lore that they don't need to know. But yeah, your own self-indulgence of you created this world. I have been told that I do kind of tend to do it in a very convoluted way though, insofar as I don't think in a very linear pattern. So it is a pattern of, oh, I'll start on this one thing, but then it will ask. And this is one of the reasons why I found World Anvil both helpful, because it allows me to get it down and keep it all in one place. But I've also found it kind of difficult because World Anvil asks these branching questions. Like, to build out a religion, it will ask you religious figures, or it will ask you for a role, like who is the head of this particular church, what is their title, kind of thing. And I end up having to create that article so that I can finish the article that I was writing. And while it's good because it helps build out and flesh out that organization, it's not great for me keeping my brain in place, unfortunately. Hello, welcome. Yeah, it's not great for keeping my brain in place, but at the end of the day, I keep a lot of my tenets in a lot of my kind of own belief systems, insofar as things that I know about my world. My worlds, and I will say this openly, my world will have conflict. There will be slavery, there will be cults, there will be religious persecution, because that is just the reality of society. However, for example, I don't make racism a systemic thing. There are potentially times when you will come across, your characters might come across a racist person, for example. But, for example, I don't tend to... A good example is orcs, or any of the kind of tribalistic races. I don't equate tribalism with savagery. So, for example, I don't atypically have evil orcs, per se, or I don't have evil goblins. That's not to say that their races don't have those kind of things, because you can come across any group of people who tend to be more savage depending on where they've been from. And this is where I kind of build out that. For example, you might come across a group of atypically evil orcs, but they may have grown up in the mountains where there was scarcity of food, so it was survival of the fittest. Tribalism and having to use brutal tactics to survive is not the same thing as making someone evil for the sake of making them evil. That's not to say you can't have just evil people. Sometimes there is just somebody who wants power, or somebody who is corrupt, or somebody who is, for whatever reason. I like to have a belief system or a reason why they are that way. I like complex villains. Anyone who's played in my game will know that there are a lot of grey area villains. And it's okay for my players to hate them and want to, end them. I'm okay with that. Because the characters are allowed to have their own prejudices. The characters are allowed to have their own systems of faith that they have built. It's why when I get my players to create a character within my worlds, I actually give them a questionnaire of anywhere between 20 and 40 questions, depending on that. And I give it to them when they come into the game and they haven't built their character yet, as a place of asking questions that they may not have thought, because I want them to play a person in my world, not just a character. For example, I'm okay if somebody doesn't want to be a hero, because let's be honest, heroes get the very short end of the stick. But at the same time, they should want to, if they want to save the world, they should want to save the world because, hey, I live in it. Or they may not want to save the world because, what's the point? Everything was taken from me. But I at least want them to have the motivation of why they can answer that. What is their motivation for yay or nay? I don't care if they want to or not. What I want to know is why. Because that helps me create a story for them that is very much catered. And anyone who plays through my games, the game will never be the same twice, because it is formulated on the players who are in. Why Pentacle Bay? If we move, you can't really see it, but I'll move down. Hello, by the way, Dumfo. Down here, there is a little star-shaped island. And so I thought I'd call it Pentacle Bay. Not particularly clever, but here we are. This is me building a version of the Feyawyr for my world. And we are currently working on winter and spring. So winter in the north, the spring quartz will be in the east here. And we're just naming the Fey villages now. We've gone through. These circular markers are your human villages and cities and things like this. The reason there are humans is the Feyawyr, the material plane, and the hells were merged together into a parallel overlapping kind of plane due to the events of the previous campaign in the previous era, where the Necronomicon was used to try to bring an entity known as the Titan King, back to potentially take over the heavens. But he was foiled. But the result of that ancient eldritch magic meant that the 3 echo kind of planes were forced over each other. The concept for that kind of merging came from a couple of places, actually. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina kind of touched on it, with the merging of hell and earth kind of being brought together, but also a book series by Anne Bishop that I really, really enjoy called the Black Jewels Trilogy. She created this world of these overlapping kind of planes, and I really liked that, and I wanted to try and have some kind of emulation of that, I guess. If that is at all helpful. Maravinha. We're going through naming towns. I am happy for any suggestions if you would like a town named, within reason. There have been a couple of stories I've had where Making the rivers? Yeah. The biggest thing I find with making rivers is trying to make it look organic. That is kind of the difficult part, you know, making something look organic, but knowing that not everything's going to have a softened curve. Like, I clearly need to, in talking about rivers and stuff, I need to fix this one over here. I will name this town first before I get distracted. Otherwise, I will end up with two places of the same name, and this is not a good idea. Oh, too many A's at the start of that. Aristotelis. Very shortly, we are going to move. Oh no, I've got to do some more winter over here, I think. We'll have to put in some citadels as well, because over the northeast here will be the Citadel of Dreams, where Earth meets air. I believe it's kind of like a smoke plane or a fog plane in here. Maybe ash. Not 100% sure. I would have to check. Yes, dreams. I wonder why. Tyrant Dungeon. It's not so much the plane of dreams. It's called the Citadel of Dreams. But it will have a level of prophetic kind of dreamscape-esque to it. Who knows? Maybe there is a small grove somewhere of candy pink trees, of which I blame you for. Nothing wrong with a good candy pink tree. Okay. We'll just try and finish naming these villages, and then that'll probably be done for today. Yeah, they're kind of purpley colour. I'm really looking forward to it because there will be an element of it that I wanted to bring in. I wanted to build a whole campaign around kind of a Candyland, fairy tale-esque kind of feel. Not so much Wonderland. I don't want to go full Wonderland, but I did think of doing that kind of like mixing of old folklore tales, like, you know, Red Riding Hood and things like that, meets a Candyland kind of aspect, which I could very much see is what happened when Nemo meets Alpheus kind of situation, where book learning and knowledge meets whimsy. Exactly. Oh, I wanted to base a whole campaign around it. I even had a name for the campaign of the Sugary Tales of Never After. And I got told that nobody would likely play it, which is really sad because I have actually backed a Kickstarter called Fat Magic that's all food-based D&D kind of adventures and food-based D&D magic and all this kind of stuff, which I have absolutely enjoyed seeing all of the content that's coming out for it. And I would love to run a world in something like that. Yeah, Fat Magic bases are all around. I think in their starting adventure it focus around the town of Salted Pork, and it's got a lot of those food aspects. And I used to, for anyone who doesn't know, I used to be a chef, and I actually love doing the food aspect of things. So people who play in my games frequently get to have a look at some very, very ornate tavern menus. Yes, I like to create some very ornate menus that inadvertently make my players hungry. But because we play digitally, I cannot provide snacks. Can you imagine Tyrant Dungeon if we actually played an in-person game and I could actually provide snacks on top of that? You know that I'd go hard with the snacks. The key is you've got to make it so that you can pick them up and eat them with their hands while still rolling dice. So nothing too messy. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, you should see some of the cheese boards and stuff I do. Not just cheese boards, whole platters. I was banned from catering for birthday parties and things like this because in our household, because I would always create far too much food. Which is not a problem that you think most people would have, but yeah, no, I would create far too much food. I had a lot of fun. So at the moment, I've got a group playing through the first era of this world, in the time of the Eldritch gods, the Eldritch gods. Like, it's gotten to the point that I've had to create proto-deities, but no, the Eldritch gods who are between the Draconic gods and the proto-deities. They're playing a game of Zorvental, but it meant that I had to create the Dark Islands for this, which is a place that we never actually explored. And the Dark Islands in the second era ceased to exist, and no one knows why, which is part of the adventure that we're exploring now. But they ceased to exist. And there was a whole island base mass off of the coast for this. And so they got to go to the Dark Islands, and I wanted that to have a real, and obviously, like I said, I want to accurately represent cultures in a way that is respectful. And something I obviously really appreciate is the food culture of places. And so because these were islands off of the coast, but not only that, they kind of hugged the equator. So I wanted them to have that kind of, obviously there were some pirate islands there, but they did very much have that Polynesian feel to them, that I wanted them to have that kind of representation of this nomadic sailing culture. But not just that, I also wanted that appreciation of Polynesian, Maori, Hawaiian, Samoan kind of cultures. So I did a lot of research into the types of foods that these islands and these people tend to eat. And there were a lot of similarities, obviously. But I then got together and made all of these into tavern menus that reflected the foods and the agriculture and the practices that these people would have used. Because obviously it's part of their culture. So, you know, their way of life and things like this. Obviously, I'm never going to try to completely obviously I'm never going to try and completely emulate real life societies or cultures, just because it is not my place to do that in some of these cultures. it is not my place to do that in some of these cultures. So obviously I very much don't want to like just straight up represent a culture without knowing the reasons behind things. And obviously I don't want to inadvertently touch on, for example, I do tend to be a bit careful around spiritual practices and things like this. And so very much within my world, at least a lot of the religions and things like this will end up atypically in some ways kind of representing my own experiences with religion, obviously coming from a very Christian heavy background originally, moving away from that into kind of a more paganistic kind of ethos, more not a straight on like belief system. My worlds will always have, well, it's a bit hard to get away from not having religion in a D&D world unless you're not going to have gods. Yeah, exactly. And obviously D&D is one of those situations, unlike the real world where we don't necessarily have, and obviously this is from personal opinion, we don't necessarily see that direct aspect of a god. D&D is a world where you do get physical representations of the gods, or at least within my world and the Forgotten Realms kind of settings. You do actually get to, the gods walk amongst them and all this kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more iffy on that of, it is okay to turn around in my world and say, well, I don't follow a god. It's more very much, I don't follow a god. But you can't turn around and say, well, I don't believe in the gods, because that is a one-way trip to getting smote. But within that idea, I tend to allow people to play their clerics and paladins, especially if they're not particularly religious or whatever, that as long as their character has faith, it's not so much the practicing of the religion and the rituals of the religion that is important, it's the faith in what they believe. Because I personally believe faith is a personal journey, and I want my players to be able to reflect that for themselves. So not everyone is going to worship in the same way, and so therefore unless they're a really tyrannical religion, I generally don't enforce my paladins to have to be like these true devotees that bow and pray every day, because that may not be what their cleric's religious practice look like. So, but they still have to show reverence to the entity in which they serve, So, but I have a paladin in one of my games right now who, they're an oath of devotion paladin to their family bloodline, not necessarily a god. And that oath to their family and their bloodline is enough to power them, because that's important. And in the same way, their character's twin sibling, who is a warlock, again, his warlock pact is to their families. He is an Aasimar, she is a tiefling, so twins who have this duality, obviously. But clearly they either have some kind of demonic entity who is the forefather of their bloodline, or angelic, whatnot. And it's probably the closest you're going to get to kind of like the Luciferian allegory, that the fallen angel allegory. So, because clearly their bloodline is descended from somebody who supported the Tyrant King a long time ago, and obviously the bloodline was punished for that betrayal of the high gods. So, which you will see in my games. Like I said, there is a level of Greek mythos in the first era of the Kronos, Zeus, that kind of story, as well as tying in a little bit of the Luciferian kind of story. And obviously the more and more I've researched into this for my world, you start to notice the similarities between religions. For example, the Fates from Greek mythos. Well, the Norse mythos has something similar in the Norns. And so there is this overlappingness of at least some of these Western religions, I suppose. And it's really interesting, and that from that's kind of where it's built out, that I obviously wanted these stories culturally to have different reasons within the world. So depending on where they are, what culture they're from, what species they're from, what race they're from, they may have a completely different belief of how the world was necessarily created or things like this. So for example, the Tabaxi experience is not going to be the same, for example, as the Wood Elf experience. However, in my game, I do make Tabaxis basically every kind of cat-like race, minus obviously the Leonin, because the Leonin is their own specific race. Which, from what I've gathered, the lion bloodline in real life anyway is actually dissimilar. Like, there isn't actually a lot of similarity in some of the other cat-like races like cheetahs and things like this, I believe. Don't 100% quote me on that. So I'm happy to do that. So this is, for example, you can have a big fluffy black cat tabaxi, but for example, in Arabic regions and things like this, there will be, the tabaxi there will look more like your Sphinx cats, your Abyssinians, the cats you would see from those kind of regions. Because, well, for example, humans in my world cover the whole colour spectrum depending on where they are originally from. And I wanted that for other races too, you know, because like it makes sense. For example, in my world, drow, all of the drow are not necessarily, like they don't necessarily come from underground, but they might be from more wintry, cold areas that would be more indicative of places that get Arctic winters where they might get dark for half of the year or whatever, because that would also make sense, you know. But it's also my way of tying back and linking back to, well, there are surface dwelling drow in the Forgotten Realms mythos. And so obviously I don't want to completely discount that because, you know, obviously it's a good starting point for somebody to build their story. But like I said, not all the drow are evil in my particular setting and things like this. Basically, I like giving my players diversity with what they want to create. Which is why generally, you know, yeah, like for example, if there's a slavery storyline, because we have had bounty hunters come in or slavers come in and capture people, generally it's they're capturing people. You know, there might be underlying factors like, oh, somebody might be a genie race. And the genie races obviously tend to be a bit more Arabic in my kind of, I'm kind of looking more Arabic, but as I'm also, because obviously genies and jinn obviously do relate back to the jinn spirits of Arabic mythos of like the kind of like trickstery / evil kind of spirit entities within Arabic culture, but there are also similar kind of things in some of the other Asiatic cultures of like in Chinese mythos of spirits and things like this. So yeah, I like being able to offer that to a player as, well, you have options. So, and for example, so the Wood Elves within my world have a very specific birth kind of story, like origin story, as in the draconic earth god that created them basically planted all these different trees, and the leaders of this race ended up stepping from these trees. And so around these ancient trees that was apparently their family bloodline, that's where the towns ended up kind of like cropping up from, and they were run by the elves of that tree, which is how they got their family names. So for example, Ash's Briar is run by the Ash family, and there's a giant ash tree. Oak's Briar, hello evil one, interestingly enough, I'm just talking about Arashi. However, we do have a elven character who is a wood elf, but he grew up in the mountains. Now, this is not atypically a region that belongs to the wood elves, but I have allowed this player to, Arashi, evil one, to create the culture around his own race, his own clan, basically. They grew up in the mountains, they serve a goddess, the goddess of fate, but because of where they're kind of situated, they have taken on influences from the water realm, which has a very Japanese kind of influence. But the mountains in which they are situated is actually part of the air realm, which has a very Chinese temple Buddhist kind of feel to it. But Arashi's clan is completely separate of that because of where they are situated. They have actually taken influences from all of the areas, so the earth realm, the water realm, the fire realm, and the air realm, I believe I missed there. But they have taken all of those influences to create this completely different culture that is indicative to this one clan. And they are a very separatist society. They keep away from others to the point that most of the rest of the world don't even know they exist. And if you know they exist, that's probably bad for you. So they are known as Fate's assassins, basically, and they believe they get prophecies from the goddess of fate to basically remove people from the tapestry. And that's their kind of cultural belief. So, and obviously part of Arashi's story is finding out the underlying truth behind that, how much of it is true, how much of it is false, and considering he believes he was born to be the next leader of his clan, and, you know, he is descended from the current leaders, so one would think that he is supposed to be the next leader, but through some actions of his own, so he is getting given the consequences of his actions, he actually broke some of his clan's most sacred laws, i.e. you do not attack your own, and he obviously has some stuff going on there. But it led to his banishment, and he was sent out into the mountains without any armor, gear, or anything like that. And it is thought that that was certain death. It is up to fate. They basically leave it up to fate as to whether you will survive. However, you are now an outsider. So Arashi's whole story is to figure out, was he right, was he wrong? But he was helped out by some members of his clan, which is against their laws. So clearly there was something else going on, or at least Arashi believes so, because he's very paranoid. So, but at the same time, that is enough of a drive for him to figure out why. What is he doing? What is his future, kind of thing. But he still believes he is meant to be the leader, but he's trying to figure out why. Why was he saved? Why did they help him? His mother, who is this great prophetess, actually betrayed their own laws to ensure that he would see the world. Is it just because she wants him to become a better leader? Hello, tape player. How are you? I hope you enjoyed watching a little bit of Star Wars the other night. We are a chaotic bunch, so I really hope you enjoyed it. I've gotten a little off track naming towns. Evil one, you will be interested to hear that that a Tyrant Dungeon actually got to name a town. Interestingly enough, they got to name a town in the Gnomish pattern. That sucks. Yeah. Hopefully you'll be able to give it a go later and catch it later then. We do actually, Evil One is streaming our D&D campaign actually tonight. We're putting the first stream up tonight. It is an entirely grung based campaign. We're all grung. It is pop culture. We are definitely not heroes. We are definitely not trying to save world. Yeah, we're definitely not trying to save the world. We are just a little group of frogs. Each of the other characters has their reasons for being out of our little froggy village. We were actually banished from our froggy village. Well, my character was. I don't know if it's so much trying to save the pond. One of us did inadvertently summon a Necron, and I'm pretty sure we're not 100% sure, but we do know that it came to our village after us. And as we flew away in a plane, like a seaplane, it was kind of destroying our village. So, not 100% sure if they're alive or dead. We did crash the plane. Again, my character was not involved in that. I was actually away that session. So they put my character in a cage. My character is probably the most chaotic, though. I'm a wild magic sorcerer, which was not intentional. Originally, this was supposed to be a one-shot, and it's kind of extended out to a campaign. But she has 6 intelligence, and she believes in increasing the standing of the grung race in the world. So one fireball at a time. It's the best way I can put it. She is a chaotic little frog. So yes, definitely check it out tonight over on Evil One's channel, so you can see a little bit more chaos. So it's a great time. So yes, we are naming elven towns. Actually, it is a modified rule set as well. So I actually roll wild on a 1, 10, and a 20. So far, I haven't rolled a single wild magic surge, which is hilarious. We don't have to get wet. Like, we don't have to soak ourselves in water every day. It is a modified rule that Evil One has made. However, we are more vulnerable to fire. So me taking all fire spells is great. We had two near character deaths last session in fighting the scarecrow. We were fighting a scarecrow. They may or may not have been caused by me. Yeah. May or may not have been caused by me. Each of our grung does have a little, like, a problem too. So, for example, my character has extra wild magic surges on certain things. We have a barbarian who can't turn his rages off, which means he can't necessarily control them. We have a rogue who is not the greatest at lockpicking. He's actually got a set of magical lockpicks who are trying to teach him to be a better thief. However, they're really loud, so he can't really sneak and do it. We have a ranger who has poor eyesight. Trying to think of who else we've got. I'm not 100% sure of Eri. Eri will be joining us, so yeah. It's great. We're fantastic. Oh, that's right. We also have the cleric. The cleric who doesn't like using their healing spells because they're kind of depressed and they're like, what's the point? So we actually have to kind of like convince him that he should save us. It's great. It's a little chaotic and it's a great time. Absolutely love it. If you like a lot of those kind of pop culture-y kind of references, I don't know. We've never actually discussed with the cleric's name is Smeg. We've never actually discussed with him who his god is, because it was just never important, I guess, at the time. But I assume we do have a froggy god. Knowing our luck, it's probably one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something. I don't know. If Evil One is around, I should get him to answer. I'll see if he is listening, because I know that he dropped in Whether or not he's still here is the question. I'll just ask him in the Discord, my Discord with him. We'll see if he can get back to it, because yeah, see, I honestly don't know. Like, we are such, like, when we started the campaign, we actually started out doing a module, which, for anyone who has seen our Star Wars campaigns, we are not great at following modules. But we accidentally started a plague, because my character, who cannot speak any common, kind of like E.T. finger touched a person and poisoned them, making the town believe that a plague had come amongst them, and so they started burning people who came down with the symptoms. We took a job from a guy, we saved him, which there were some dwarves that were really angry at us, which we kind of took them down. We took the job for this guy, we went and did the job, we came back, we told him we did the job, then we accidentally killed him. We're just, none of it's been on purpose, it's just we're terrible at actually succeeding. We try really hard, but it's fun for me getting to play a complete little chaos monkey. But in however many sessions we've played, they still haven't learned not to leave my character on her own. Left to her own devices, she is, she cannot be trusted. Tape player. Can you think of a wintry based name that you would like a town called? Winter or spring, because we're working on winter and spring. Gnomish kind of naming conventions are things like Twiddly, Mudlick, Funk Thwack, that kind of thing. If you can't think of something like Elven or Dwarvish or something like that, if you would like, within reason. I think you... Crinkle. Okay, would you like that in winter or spring? Well, I'll show you the bigger map here and you can have a bit of a look. Where would you like it? Crinkle. Winter. Okay. Where have we got left? We've got this one on a little island here. What kind of place is Crinkle? The sound of ice. Okay, we'll bring it up here somewhere. You know what? We'll move. Yes, we'll take you over here, co-host. We'll bring you down here. And we will put Crinkle up here by these glaciers. There we go. We have Crinkle on the map for Tape Player. Now we're starting to get over to a bit more spring here. I think we've got... Where are my spring names? Natural Cave. I like that. Somewhere over here. As you can see, it's right near all these glacial mountainous wall. So that fits perfectly. Move it a little bit closer to the coast for you. So it can have this nice mountainous... Ooh, I like that. That's pretty. We like some crystals. Who doesn't like a good crystal? Sparkly rocks. We love it. Okay. if 2 towns here have the same name. Want to avoid that. How does it work, crystals? Oh, nice. Did you do the world generator? I know, because I know that Incarnate does have that now, like a world generator. That sounds like a very appropriate way to do that. Just throwing blobs at it and hoping for the best. I just wanted to get these spring villages in. I raced it all 5. Yeah, that's usually the way, and then you just have to go through and tweak it. I feel like you'd have like a nobility section, like, which is like the central area, which is, you know, you could have your royalty, then you could have your politicians out from that, then you could have, you know, until eventually you're working on your smaller villages, smaller village areas, which, you know, there are going to have to be people that are farmers. And when I say farmers, you might have community gardens, you might have, depending on how technologically advanced, you could have like hydroponic farmers and things like this, like huge factories just set up to formulate the food and produce. Like, because it's just a giant city, you, like, I suppose the easiest way to formulate the actual city, like the world itself, is where are your like fundamental things coming from, like food, medicine, because that will help you formulate like whether you want a caste system, a class system, you know, that kind of thing. Maybe. How are the districts separated then? Because you could do it with walls, like a walled city situation. Yeah. how are you thinking that you're going to transport your goods and things like that? Because that would also help. Because if you're not going to do walls or something like this, it could be, for example, trainways, roadways, ring system. Yeah. Because generally, from what I have gathered about how populations and towns and stuff tend to, fantasy rail, mostly underground. Ooh. A pass system. Yes. We love a good multi-pass moment. Multi-pass. See, you've got a good start of it. Like, you know how you want things to get around. The hard part is like, and this is something I struggle with quite a lot, is distance. So figuring out how long it will take for players to move from town to town kind of thing. Ooh, something that might be a good thing to kind of look at as well, and I think they're doing them in Dubai, is these enclosed cityscapes. There are some really interesting designs that I believe that they've been trying out in Dubai for like city-states. So they're isolated. Okay. See, that does sound very interesting, though. Oh, yeah, definitely. I know that there are some really good kind of third-party mechanics for like urban druids and things like this as well. Because obviously a city campaign, an urban campaign, for example, druids aren't necessarily going to run into your average things like bears, deer, things like this. Well, that's exactly it. It's definitely an interesting thing because obviously different party members are going to come from different factions. Like clerics, for example, are most likely going to come from an aspect of the city where it's mostly religious. So you're thinking like your Roman states, the Vatican, things like that. So there's that possibility. You know, military, town guards, things like this. Again, they're going to have their own culture. You only need to see cultures and societies. You only need to see that kind of inclusion within teams and things like that. It's a very interesting way of building it. I think you're going to have a really interesting and fun time building it. The hard part is keeping that contained, I suppose. Because it's very easy to lose yourself in the actual world building aspect. Because those questions could legitimately go on forever. Nice. Yeah, it's a good place to have it, like, well, especially because you need to know who's at least in charge of the city. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of your world building will actually end up coming, as I'm probably sure you're aware, is coming once you actually have the player characters, because then it will give you a focus on what you probably need to create as opposed to what you feel you should be creating. Oh, we're almost there. I could probably take some of these out because there is more spring to build, so. Oh, see, you know, a group of people that want to run D&D, that's good. Yeah, the problem we always have is actually having people who want to run it as opposed to people who want to play in it. Yeah, that's always... See, it's nice though that you have people new people who want to play too. It's nice introducing people to the game. I really like that. And obviously, you know, part of that is, you know, them learning what they like and things like this as well, because not everybody is going to like the right, you know, which I personally value the session 0 getting to talk about expectations, but I know that if they're a group of people you already know, friends and things like that, you know, you end up having those discussions with them anyway. Okay, 2 to go. You know what? Probably don't need this one. There we go. Okay, everybody. We have... Ignore that one. You saw nothing. We have put in all of our elven towns and things like this. On Friday, we will come back and we will put in some of the landmarks like the citadels, the courts and things like that, before spending our time putting in a whole heap of trees and things like this. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have enjoyed watching me build this, talking about D&D, my principles, practices, tavern maps, tavern menus, food in general. Otherwise, if you like what I do, hit the follow and turn on notifications so you know that when I stream. I do stream all week, Monday to Friday, and you can find my schedule down below. If you like seeing me and you want to, you know, be involved in a few more of the projects that I seem to be involved in, have a look down in my About section. You can see some of the games that I'm playing in and, you know, keep you apprised. Otherwise, if you want to go back and watch this, you can find everything on my YouTube channel of the same name, Boomeadow. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great week if I don't catch you tomorrow or Friday. And I will see you again soon. Have a great week. Have a great day. And I will talk to you later. Bye.